Chapter 39 Prophecy. Karasor. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Perhaps it would be best to begin by setting down the necessary conditions for a genuine prophecy. We shall find that most of the famous predictions are excluded without need of more specific examination. But priority, please, as usual, for the etymology. Prophecy means forth speaking, more or less equal to inspired. It has nothing to do with foretelling the future, though it may do so, as it may do anything, being only the ravings of a poet, drunkard, or madman. You remember how Saul came upon a company of youths all prophesying away together to beat the band and join the merry throng? So people said, is Saul also among the prophets? Meaning a man capable of the divine intoxication of love, song, eloquence, or whatever else enthusiastic might possess him. Men seized by the afflatus were found to be capable of extraordinary exploits. Hence, the condition was admired and envied by the average clod, also imitated by the average crook. For all that, I am going for once to yield to popular clamor and use words in their popular sense. That seems to me roughly this: prediction is a forecast based on reason, prophecy, one which claims the warrant of magical powers. You agree? Then we can get on. Number one, the prophecy must announce itself as such. We cannot have people picking up odds and ends which may be perfectly irrelevant and insisting that they conceal forecasts. This excludes Great Pyramid lunatics. It would be quite simple to do the same sham calculations with the Empire State Building. When the architects protested, it is simple to reply, why, but of course. God was most careful not to let them know what they were really doing, or they would have died of fright. This argument was actually put forward by the Spiritists when Zanzig confessed that his music hall exploits were accomplished by means of a code. It is quite useless to get any sense whatever into the heads of these bigoted imbeciles. 2. The date of the prophecy must antecede that of its fulfillment. The very greatest care must be taken to ensure this. When both dates are remote, as in the case of fulfilled biblical prophecies, this is often impossible. 3. The prophecy must be precise. This rules out stuff like the burden of Nineveh and the like. Incidentally, the burden of Damascus does not seem to have had much luck so far. By latest accounts, the old burg wasn't feeling too badly. We may also refer to the second advent. Behold, I come quickly. There have been quite a few false alarms to date. It began with Jesus himself snapping off a disciple's head. If I will that he tarry till I come, what is that to thee? Well, somebody was disappointed. 5. The verification must be simple, natural, unique, and unmistakable. Forced and far fetched explanations, distortions of Kabbalistic or other mathematical reasonings are barred. 6. The prophecy itself must possess the complement of this precision. It must be so perfectly unintelligible at the time that the elucidation of the answer makes it certain that the prophet knew precisely the whole riddle. I feel that this condition is itself expressed in a somewhat oracle form. I will try to clarify by citing what I consider a perfect example. Perfect, I say, because the must is a little too strong. There are degrees of excellence. Quote, that stele they shall call the abomination of desolation. Count well its name, and it shall be to you as 7:18. End quote. Al, chapter 3, verse 19. The stele is that whose discovery culminated in the writing of the Book of the Law. Here, the first part is still quite unintelligible to me. I have tried analysis of the original phrase in scripture and nearly everything else, entirely in vain. One can see dimly how people, recognizing that stele as the talisman responsible for reducing half the cities of Europe to rubble, might very well make reference to those original prophecies. But at the best, that's nothing to cable to O.T.O about. Now, the second part. This was even more baffling than the other. Count well its name? How can I? It never had a name. So I tried all sorts of experiments with 718. Shin 300, the letter of the spirit, with our key number 418 looked promising. Only one more pie crust. I kept attacking, off and on, for many a long year. Got out all sorts of fantastic solutions, complex and confused. They simply shouted their derision at me. It was one glorious night at Cephalou. Too utterly superb to waste in sleep, I got up. I adored the stars and the moon. I reveled in the universe. Yet there was something pulling at me. It pulls at my body into my chair. And I found myself at this old riddle of 718, half a dozen comic failures. But I felt that there was something on the way. Idly, I put down Stella in the Greek 52 and said, perhaps we can make a name out of the difference between that and 718. I jumped. 718 minus 52 equals 666. My own name. Why, of course, quoth he in glee. It is in fact the stele of 666, for it is the stele of Ankh-Nakhnakhonsu, my name in those past days. Oh no, said something, that's not good enough. Count well its name, the stele of Ankh-Nakhnakhonsu. A name is something to which it answers, quite different from a title. That solution is clever, but it just won't do because that stele never had a name. You lie, I shouted, as the full light broke through the mist of my mind. In these 3,000 years, it has once, if only once, had a name by invoking which you could bring it up before you. Its name is Stele 666 in the catalog of the museum at Bullock. A single simple hammer stroke, and the nail is driven home to the head. Compare this with the chaotic devices of the bilateral cipher maniacs, by the application of which it is easy to prove that Bernard Shaw wrote Rudyard Kipling. Or anything else. You pay your money, you take your choice. 7. Another strong point is that the prophecy should, on the surface, mean something vague and plausible, and, interpreted, possess this same quality of unique accuracy. For instance, though it is not a prediction, consider love is the law, love under will. Yes, that sounds very well. I dare say that is an excellent point of philosophy, but, well, anyone might say that. Oh no. For when we use the Greek of the technical terms, we find agape love and Thelema will, both of the value of 93. And these only two blossoms of the tree whose root is 31, and the entire numerical verbal system based thereupon organized with incredibly simple intricacy. Well, that is a eohippus of an entirely different tint. It is no more the chance, if happy, statement of any smooth-tongued philosopher, but the evidence of, and the key to, a vast design. As well attribute the Riemann Christoph tensor to the happy thought of some postprandial mathematician. Here is another case. Now then, this two-in-one letter, moon, sun, is the third key to this law. And on the discovery of that fact, after years of constant seeking, what sudden splendors of truth, sacred as secret, blazed in the midnight of my mind. Observe now, this circle squared in its failure is a key also. Now I knew that in the value of the letters of Al-Him, the gods, the Jews had concealed a not quite correct value of 2, the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter, to 4 places of decimals, 3.1415. Nearer would be 3.1416. If I prefix our key, 31, putting sun and moon conjoined, moon sun, Set or Satan, before the old gods, I get 3.141593. Pi correct as 6 places, 6 being my own number and that of Horus the sun. And once more, this time an actual prediction. Here again is what might at first seem almost an evasion. One cometh after him. Indeed, I suppose so. It fits anybody who discovers it or claims to have done so. Not one little bit. For when the time came and the key was found, the finder's name in the order was and had been from the moment of his admission as a probationer, ashad, the Hebrew word for one, and he came after him in the precise technical sense that he was, in fact, the next person to undertake the adventure of the abyss. I hope you are not getting the idea that my prophetic ambit is limited to these high-flotten metaphysical masterpieces of runic lore. In case you do, I now propose to break your 7 green withs that were never dried altogether. Delilah, for I shall keep my hair on. I shall go forth to war. From 1920 to 1923, my abode for a season was the house called the Horsel of the Abbey of Thelema, that lieth upon Santa Barbara, overlooking the town of Telephus. See Homer and Samuel Butler II, but called later by the Romans Cephalodium, and now Cephalu. There did I toil to expand my little part of Book 3 to the larger volume, now more generally known as Magick in Theory and Practice. After numerous misadventures, it was published in 1928. I refer you to that book, page 96. Quote, one last word on this subject. There is a magical operation of maximum importance, the initiation of a new aeon. When it becomes necessary to utter a word, the whole planet must be bathed in blood. Before man is ready to accept the law of Thelema, the great war must be fought. This bloody sacrifice is the critical point of the world ceremony of the proclamation of Horus, the crowned and conquering child, as Lord of the Aeon. The whole matter is prophesied in the book of the law itself. Let the student take note and enter the ranks of the host of the sun. End quote. It is a pity that I cannot prove my footnote, but this chapter 12 was part of the original MS, advertised as to be published in 1912. You may take my word for it for once. And in any case, we have the prophecy of Bartzabal, the spirit of Mars. In the early summer of 1910, that wars involving the disaster of Turkey and Germany would be fought within 5 years. See The New York World, December 1914. We now proceed to Magick, page 112. Quote, but now observe how the question of the magical link arises. No matter how mighty the truth of Thelema, it cannot prevail unless it is applied to and by mankind. As long as the book of the law was in manuscript, it could only affect the small group amongst whom it was circulated. It had to be put into action by the magical observation of publishing it. When this was done, it was done without proper perfection. Its commands as to how the work ought to be done were not wholly obeyed. There was doubt and repugnance in Frater Perdurebo's mind, and they hampered his work. He was half hearted. Yet, even so, the intrinsic power of the truth of the law and the impact of the publication were sufficient to shake the world so that a critical war broke out, and the minds of men were moved in a mysterious manner. The second blow was struck by the republication of the book in September 1913, and this time the might of this magic burst out and caused a catastrophe to civilization. At this hour, the master Therion is concealed, collecting his forces for a final blow. When the book of the law and its comment is published with the force of his whole will in perfect obedience to the instructions which have up to now been misunderstood or neglected, the result will be incalculably effective. The event will establish the kingdom of the crowned and conquering child over the whole earth, and all men shall bow to the law, which is love under will. End quote. This should be plain enough and satisfactory. However, I thought it was time to draw public attention to these matters more empathetically. In fulfillment of my pledge given above and of the instructions originally given to me by the masters, I got out the equinox of the gods at 6:22 a.m., December 22nd, 1937. And to fulfill my condition number 1 above of prophecy, as well as to establish the date, I got a reporter on the spot with the result following. Quote, "These names make news. Mixed bag of early birds. An Englishman, a Jew, an Indian, a Negro, and a Malayan. No, it's not one of those saloon bar jokes. These men were assembled on the embankment by Cleopatra's Needle soon after 6 a.m. yesterday. They were certainly the most oddly assorted party out and about at that hour. Their reason for being there was odd, too. They were there to assist at the publication of a book by a 62-year-old magician, Aleister Crowley. Publication occurred at 6:22 sharp when the sun entered Capricornus. Crowley made a short speech as the priest of the princes, proclaimed the law of Thelema, handed copies of the book to white, red, brown, black, yellow representatives. Representative of the black race was a dancing girl. Indian was a non English speaking Bengali Muslim who seemed rather puzzled by the whole business. Book contains message dictated to Crowley at Cairo in 1904 by Iowas, a being whose nature he does not fully understand, but who described himself as the minister of Horapar Krat, the Lord of Silence. Prospectus of book says it's been published 3 times before, adds sinisterly that first publication was 9 months before the outbreak of the Balkan War. On the second, 9 months before the outbreak of the World War. Third, 9 months before the outbreak of the Sino Japanese War. No coincidence, it says. The might of this magic burst out and caused a catastrophe to civilization. Well, we'll see next September. It's a bit hard of you to wish another war on us, I said to Crowley. Oh, but if everyone will only do as I tell them to, he replied, the catastrophe can be averted. Somehow, I fear they won't. End quote. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Then I issued a prospectus for the book, giving the facts as to the previous publications and their results, and leaving blank a space after the fourth publication to wait the event. The first publication, 9 months before the outbreak of the Balkan War, which broke up the Near East. When this was done, it was done without proper perfection. Its commands as to how the work ought to be done were not wholly obeyed. Yet, even so, the intrinsic power of the truth of the law and the impact of publication were sufficient to shake the world, so that a critical war broke out and the minds of men were moved in a mysterious manner. The second publication. 9 months before the outbreak of the World War, which broke up the West, the second blow was struck by the republication of the book in September 1913, and this time caused a catastrophe to civilization. At this hour, the master Therion is concealed, collecting his forces for a final blow. When the book of the law and its comment is published, in perfect obedience to the instruction, the result will be undeniably effective. The event will establish the kingdom of the crowned and conquering child over the whole earth, and all men shall bow to the law, which is love under will. Magick, pages 112 through 113, written in 1922, was published in 1929. The third publication, 9 months before the outbreak of the Sino-Japanese War, which is breaking up the Far East. The fourth publication, 6:22 a.m., December 22nd, 1938. This series of actions complies perfectly with the condition of prophecy. 9 months elapsed, and I was able to overprint, also to reprint, enlarge to 4 pages my remaining prospectus in red ink as follows, quote, 9 months before the betrayal, which stripped Britain of the last rags of honor, prestige, and security, and will break up civilization, end quote. I have always maintained that Munich marked the true outbreak of the war because Hitler's rape of Czechoslovakia, however justifiable, was incompatible with our foreign policy, and Munich is 9 months to a day after my gesture. This, then, I consider a completely documented case of prophecy. And I shall be completely documented case of brain fog unless I shut up now. Love is the law. Love under will. Yours for eternally.